Watching a Women Trapped in a Room, Part 4. Below is a revised and significantly expanded version of Part 4, preserving the narrative voice and core events, while refining the grammar and adding depth. The resulting piece is close to 4,000 words. All names, places, and contextual details are drawn from the text you provided, and no new plot elements are introduced that contradict the existing parts of the series. I had to do something, and I had to do it right now. My mind was stuck in a loop, replaying one thought over and over. If Melanie was a fake, they must have sent her. If they sent her, they know. They know about everything. The messages in Rachel's paintings, the times I hesitated to hit either button, the questions I've been asking. And they know I didn't follow their script. Each repetition of this thought made it harder for me to breathe. Panic and fear crawled up my chest, constricting my lungs so every inhale felt like a labor. I jumped up from my chair, pacing back and forth, my eyes flicking repeatedly to the monitor as though Rachel might have more instructions for me. Some sign that she was aware of my plight and could guide me. But all I saw was her lying on the bed, her back turned to the camera. I couldn't tell for sure, but something about her posture suggested she might be crying. The sight of her, apparently alone and upset, spiked my terror into guilt-laced adrenaline. No, I told myself, I need to fix this. I need to help her and do it fast. Except, I had no real plan. The scenarios swirling in my mind were scattered and half-baked. Call the police, hit the red button, flee into the night. Each option felt doomed. But if my illusions were shattering, then I had to act now, before they shut me down, or worse. Unable to stand my own indecision another moment, I forced myself to the door and slipped into the locker room. I was half expecting armed guards to be waiting for me. The space was empty, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched more intently than ever. Cameras in the corner, microphones in the walls. Possibly, the organization behind this place had always been secretive and manipulative. My phone was in my locker. My shaking hands fumbled the combination twice before I managed to open the metal door. Clutching the phone in my sweaty grip, I tried to hold it casually by my side. No point pretending, I thought bitterly. If they already know, there's no sense hiding. Still, I hurried back into the surveillance room, ignoring the pounding of my heart and the dryness in my mouth. The overhead camera's red recording light was on. Of course it was. A grim voice in my head mocked. They're seeing everything you do, Thomas. But I had no choice. I have to do this, I repeated internally, jamming a thumb onto my phone's camera app icon. I hit record. A soft beep escaped from the speaker, and my stomach lurched. Damn it, I forgot to mute it. Oh well. Time was short, and stealth was probably irrelevant at this point. Once I was sure it was recording, I turned the phone toward myself, trying to calm my breathing enough to speak. My name is Tommy. Thomas Calhoun, I said, voice cracking on the edges of panic. And my job is watching a woman trapped in a room. A brief sob threatened to choke me, but I pushed it down. This is not a joke or a movie or whatever. This is real. I paused for air, pressing my lips together to stop them from trembling. For 3 years my job has been to sit in this room, I said, rotating the phone so the camera captured the entire environment, and watch a video feed of a woman locked up in a bedroom somewhere. The lens swept across the small enclosed bathroom door, the water cooler, the sturdy desk with its 2 monitors, and the box with 2 prominent buttons, one red, one green. I didn't realize at first that she was a prisoner, or maybe I knew and convinced myself otherwise because the money was good. But either way, I know now she's not free. She's in danger, and so am I. I swallowed hard, stepping closer to the left monitor, making sure the phone recorded a clear image of Rachel lying on that bed. My voice shook with urgency. That's her. That's Rachel. I don't know where she's being held. I don't know who exactly is in charge, or why they're doing this, but they're bad people. She's not safe. Tears stung my eyes and I struggled to keep my words coherent. I'm begging anyone who sees this, please help. Help her. I can't do it alone. I swung the camera back to my face. All I know is I've been going to a building outside San Antonio, near. I momentarily remembered the rules of posting addresses online and faltered, choosing to mention that it's not fully real. It's at redacted. I don't even know if it's registered under a real name. I only have partial names of 2 men. One calls himself Mr. P. Solomon. The other might be named Charlie Jeffries. My voice quivered as I repeated that name. They might be aliases. Please, if you're watching this, I'm not crazy. I know how it sounds. Just come, see the room. Help me figure out where she really is, so you can save her. And that's when I heard the outer door opening, someone entering the locker room. My stomach lurched. They're here. With trembling fingers, I fumbled to stop the recording. Send it now, my mind screamed. I tried to hit the share icon, a new wave of panic rolling over me. I selected all the contacts in my phone. Maybe they'd pass it on, or maybe they'd ignore me as insane, but at least one might take it seriously. Then I stabbed the send button. The phone screen lit up with an error. Not connected to data service or Wi-Fi. Please send again when connected. My insides went cold. This entire building had a cell signal jammer or something, which made sense. They never wanted watchers to access the internet. I had known that intellectually, but in my panic I'd hoped maybe there was a stray bar of signal. Obviously not. I whirled around just as the door to my surveillance room swung open. Mr. Solomon stood in the threshold, two hulking men flanking him, both wearing dark suits that clung to their broad shoulders like uniforms. Solomon lifted a hand, wagging one finger at me, as if lecturing a naughty child. "No service in here, Thomas," he said quietly, his tone mocking. "But then, you should never have needed service if you'd followed the rules." One of his suited men stepped forward, quick as a striking snake. I lurched toward the small attached bathroom, hoping to lock myself in. But another guard caught me from behind. They twisted my arms behind me, forcing me to drop my phone. The device clattered onto the tile floor, the screen still displaying that infuriating message about no data service. My short cry of pain was muffled by the guard's forearm pressing into my throat. Within seconds, they bound me with plastic zip ties, my wrists, my ankles, and yanked a black hood over my head. Darkness enveloped me, thick and claustrophobic. My breathing grew ragged with mounting terror. The next thing I knew, I was hoisted up, my feet leaving the floor. They carried me out of the surveillance room, the hood pressing uncomfortably against my mouth. Rachel, I thought desperately. What about Rachel? Rough hands maneuvered me through a doorway, then presumably out of the building, because I felt a rush of cooler night air on my neck. Footsteps scuffed on the pavement, and then I was shoved onto something hard. The back of a van, I realized dimly. I tried to struggle, but my wrists were cutting into the plastic restraints, and my ankles were uselessly pinned together. My captors rolled me onto my side in what felt like a cramped, metal-walled space. I heard a door slam, then a second. The van's engine revved. Someone climbed in next to me, the weight shifting the floor. Gasping, I tried to speak. Where are we going?" My words muffled by the hood. "Please, just let Rachel go." "She!" A short laugh cut me off. It sounded like Mr. Solomon, though his voice was partially distorted by the cloth covering my ears. "Relax," he said. "We'll explain everything once we get where we're going. Until then, you might want to rest. It's a long drive." I tried to ask more, but I felt a sting on my neck, like a needle or a small blade. Almost at once, a dizzy warmth flooded me, making my limbs go slack. I tried to fight it, but the drug worked quickly, siphoning my consciousness away. My last coherent thought was that I'd failed Rachel again, and maybe this time it was truly the end for both of us. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes to a blurry fluorescent light overhead. My mouth felt like sandpaper, and every muscle ached with a dull, heavy pulse. Groggily, I turned my head. I was lying on a padded table of some sort, reminiscent of what you'd see in a doctor's exam room, though more makeshifted. My wrists were free, but my body felt too lethargic to move quickly. A voice drew my attention. "Hello again, Thomas," it said. Squinting, I spotted Mr. Solomon seated in a chair across the room. He gave me a thin, polite smile, as though we were old acquaintances meeting for tea. I forced myself to speak, my throat rasping. Where am I?" He tilted his head. "A safer place than that building. You could call it a private facility, though you won't find it listed on any official records." His voice was mild, as though discussing mundane office politics. The door behind him was shut, no windows visible, and a small overhead camera blinked in a corner. My mind snapped back to Rachel. I tried to push myself upright, ignoring the dull pounding in my head. "Where is she? Is Rachel okay?" "Mr. Hungary." Solomon leaned forward, arms braced on his knees, studying me with a faint curiosity. "You're quite the heroic figure, aren't you?" he said, a trace of irony creeping into his tone. "Running around, brandishing your phone, making half-baked escape plans. I have to respect the initiative, if not the execution." He stood up then, revealing a small handgun resting on his lap. He lifted it casually. "But before we discuss the details of your new situation, you asked about Rachel. Would you like to see her?" My stomach knotted. I slid off the table, nearly buckling as pins and needles shot up my legs. The sedative was still wearing off. I fought to keep upright, fueled by desperation. "Yes, please," I said, voice shaky. "I want to see her." The The real her. He responded with a mirthless chuckle, then gestured toward a door at the back of the room. Be my guest? Worry flared in me as I approached that door. Some primal part of my mind screamed that it was a trap, but I needed to know. My hand shook as I gripped the knob. The door turned smoothly and swung open into a starkly lit chamber. It reminded me of a laboratory or a large storage area, with banks of strange machines along one wall and a series of stainless steel counters. At the far end stood a tall cylindrical tank, some sort of transparent container, maybe an aquarium, filled with a murky grayish liquid. Faint mechanical hums echoed in the air, and a chemical tang stung my nostrils. What is this place? I muttered, stepping inside. My gaze latched onto the tall cylinder. There was a shape suspended within the fluid, vaguely human, limbs floating like seaweed. Oh God. I forced myself forward, each step heavier than the last, my pulse roaring in my ears. Please let this be some twisted decoy. But no. As I drew closer, I recognized her features. It was indeed Rachel, or someone who looked exactly like her, except her skin was sallow, bloated in places, hair drifting across her face in limp strands. She appeared lifeless, embalmed in that tank. I pressed a hand to the glass, heartbreak and horror colliding in my chest. Rachel, I gasped, voice trembling. No. She was dead, her eyes half open and staring into nothing. From behind me, Mr. B. Solomon's voice came, cutting into my horror with a casual malice. Go ahead, have a good look. You've earned it. I spun around, rage boiling up. You murdered her, I roared, lurching toward him. In a flash, he leveled the gun. Before I could even try to dodge, a thunderous crack sounded. My entire body jerked, and I collapsed to the cold floor. Electric shocks spasmed through my limbs, rendering me helpless as he stepped closer. Don't worry, Thomas, he said, voice almost soothing. It won't kill you, just a low voltage round to incapacitate you for a bit. Hardly lethal. He motioned to unseen figures who rushed in, scooping me off the floor. My extremities felt half numb, half burning from the shock. They dragged me back into the original room, placing me on the padded table again. This time they fastened heavy straps around my arms and legs, presumably so I wouldn't thrash or hurt myself once the paralysis wore off. My tears blurred my vision, sorrow and fury battling for dominance in my chest. Mr. Solomon resumed his seat in front of me, gun resting on his thigh. You called me a murderer, he said, but you're too quick to judge. I didn't kill Rachel. In fact, I didn't join this project until about 7 years ago, whereas Rachel died over 8 years ago. I tried to spit out a curse, but my tongue felt thick from the lingering effect of the shock. Lies, I managed, though it came out slurred. My mind reeled from the horrifying sight of her body suspended in that tank. This can't be real, I thought. Another trick, yet my gut said otherwise. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with a twisted enthusiasm. Thomas, I told you we'd start being honest now. Remember, our old illusions are no longer necessary. Let me tell you about Rachel, the real Rachel Donovan. She had a certain talent for remote viewing, seeing events and places far outside her physical senses. Some call it psychic ability, others call it intuitive espionage. Governments have studied it, quietly, for decades. We recruited her when she was 17, lured by money, and manipulated into staying. Over time, we discovered she was exceptionally gifted, capable not only of normal remote viewing, but of glimpsing images from different points in time. He exhaled, an odd mixture of pride and regret shadowing his features. We introduced a foreign substance into her body, hoping to amplify her abilities. For a while, it appeared successful. She began producing paintings that captured events far beyond the present day. But the introduction was risky. Eventually, her health deteriorated. He paused, giving me a solemn look. We tried to save her, but she died unexpectedly. We decided to preserve her remains to continue studying the changes in her physiology. That's what you saw in the other room. Her body has been suspended all this time, as we gleaned data from the tissues. I stared at him, mind spinning. My lips parted in shaky denial. That doesn't explain. The camera feed. I saw her alive. She painted messages, called for help. Tears flooded my eyes. You can't just say she's been dead for 8 years. That's insane. A hint of triumph touched his smile. Indeed. But let me ask you, do you believe time is linear? Do you believe it's unchangeable? Rachel was painting messages to you from her present, which might well have been your future or your present or any mixture thereof. That's the nature of her gift. She saw you. She wrote your name. We realized that meant you existed in her timeline. Someone named Thomas, or at least identified as such, was seeing her paintings, interacting with her. yet also not physically there with her. She was, in effect, bridging timelines. He gestured at the closed door, as though referencing the tank behind it. When she died, she left behind a cluster of incomplete paintings and cryptic references to a Thomas who would watch her, want to help her, but never succeed. We studied them for years, but we found only riddles. So eventually I proposed a more direct approach. The Thomas Project. We hired watchers named Thomas, or men we could plausibly rename Thomas, and fed them carefully curated videos and illusions of Rachel's life prior to her death. We seeded messages, tested reactions, built scenarios around those paintings. Our hope that we find the right Thomas, the one Rachel actually glimpsed across time, the one who might see or do something crucial we have yet to understand. My head spun with revelation and horror. I remembered the swirl of color in her paintings. Please help me, Thomas. That girl isn't me. The jumbled layers of illusions. You're telling me the woman I was watching was never in real-time captivity, I croaked. He shrugged. Not during your specific vantage. No, at some point in her timeline, yes, she was confined. But by the time we spliced the videos together and set up your feed, she'd already been long deceased in our presento. He gave me a pitying look. It's complicated, but we've concluded she had precognitive remote viewing, seeing future watchers, painting clues for them. And you, Thomas, are apparently the one she singled out, though we're still not sure why. My throat felt like sandpaper. That's insane, I repeated, tears streaking my cheeks. How is that even possible? But a sinking dread in me whispered that it might be true, that everything I saw was just footage from an earlier time, heavily edited, posted out of sequence, with the illusions of sedation and masked figures all part of the show. All part of the show. Meanwhile, they kept her body stored in a tank for further study, since her psychic ability was gone along with her life. God, I thought, what a nightmare. Solomon lightly tapped the gun against his leg. Thomas, I understand how you must feel. Betrayed, confused, furious. You have every right, but you ask me why. The reason is, we want to glean the final secrets from Rachel's timeline bridgings. She left behind paintings that mention you specifically. We suspect there's more to come. Maybe we can still decode them if you finish the feed. If you watch all of it. I tried to speak, but fresh tears choked me. Eventually I rasped. You want me to keep watching those cursed videos? After everything you've done? He nodded solemnly. Yes. That's precisely it, P. We suspect that in the footage, or in your reactions to it, we'll find the last key to understanding the phenomenon. If Rachel truly saw you in the future, there's a chance she left you final messages. We can't interpret them alone, but by observing you, how you respond, what you notice, maybe we can unlock that meaning. He motioned to a nearby computer monitor, which flickered to life. A paused image of Rachel's bedroom filled the screen, the moment I'd last left off. You see, your shifts in that building were only partial exposures, Solomon continued. We can feed the rest of the archived tapes to you in real time, let you watch the end of her life as it happened, day by day, hour by hour. If something new surfaces, some final painting or phrase, we need you to interpret it. He lifted an eyebrow. And you will do this, because the alternative is, well, less pleasant. A swirl of anguish, rage, and hopelessness battered me. So, you'll kill me if I refuse. I spat. He gave a half smile. No, you're too valuable to kill, though we have no qualms about using force if you disobey. Consider yourself a special consultant. We're prepared to keep you here indefinitely. Provide for your basic needs. You watch. We record your reactions. We decipher anything new. Once that's done, we'll see if there's a place for you in our organization, or if it's best you remain a permanent guest. He gestured at the straps pinning me to the table. I could barely keep my vision from blurring again. Rachel was dead. She'd been dead for 8 years. All that time I spent worried about her present captivity. It was a carefully orchestrated ruse. The illusions of her painting messages, those were real to her in her timeline. But I was only watching heavily doctored or restructured footage. She must have glimpsed me somehow across time. But everything else, Melanie's visit, talk of actors, illusions, was all part of a labyrinthine test, or maybe a parallel operation. The layers keep unraveling. Closing my eyes, I tried to recall each step that led me here. The job ad, the weird interview, discovering that Rachel was forcibly taken from her room periodically, the cryptic hidden messages, the day I attempted to record a video on my phone. Then, Melanie showing up outside my apartment claiming she was an actress. Eyed my apartment claiming She was an actress. Perhaps that too was part of the labyrinth. An attempt to see if I'd buy a simpler explanation that she was an actress, rather than the truly bizarre truth of crossing timelines. Maybe that entire storyline was a decoy to glean my reaction. "That girl isn't me," the painting had said. Indeed, when I finally opened my eyes again, Solomon's face hovered in my blurred vision. "I realize how overwhelming it is," he said softly, false sympathy dripping from his words. "But let's not waste time with denial. You can't leave. Not after everything we invested in you. So let's continue, shall we?" Strapped to the table, tears leaking down my cheeks, I let out a trembling breath. I hate you," I whispered, my voice haggard. "You twisted everything. Used her. She was a person." His expression remained dispassionate. "In the eyes of the program, she was a resource. We do regret her passing. But let's not dwell on moral judgments. We have work to do." At his nod, one of the large men from earlier stepped forward, pressing a button on the side of the padded table. The backrest began to pivot upright, bringing me to a semi-seated position in front of the computer monitor. My arms were still strapped, but at least I could see the screen clearly. On it, a ghostly image of Rachel in mid-motion, half-turned to the camera, was frozen in time. Solomon clicked a key, and the video resumed. Rachel resumed her routine, painting, or perhaps speaking words that I couldn't hear. "No, I can't do this," I thought, dread tightening in my gut. But I had no choice. Strapped and held at gunpoint, I stared in silent despair as the footage unspooled. She was painting something in the corner, the camera vantage overhead just like always. My tears started anew. "She doesn't know she's going to die soon," I realized. The timeline was pre-recorded. "She's painting for me across 8 years of difference." Solomon spoke calmly. "Observe carefully. Thomas, note your reactions. If at any point you see a hidden message, let us know. That's all we ask. For now." He folded his arms, waiting. A wave of grief swamped me. Rachel was dead. The girl in the tank was her actual body, robbed of life. And yet, on screen, she lived, painting, pacing, maybe calling out for me. Time looped in a way that made me shiver. If she'd truly seen me in her final days, had she known how futile it would be. The entire fiasco hammered home just how small and powerless I was. But a kernel of resolve flickered, too. If she wrote more messages, I'll find them. If there's some final piece of truth she left behind, I'll see it beam. I inhaled sharply, then forced my gaze on the screen, ignoring the tears in my eyes. The camera feed had advanced. Rachel was setting aside one canvas, retrieving another. Was this the painting session leading up to "Please help me, Thomas"? Or was it after? Hard to say. The timeline was jumbled. "Focus," I told myself. There might be more messages, or maybe I could glean some clue to eventually escape or ruin their twisted plan. Behind me, Solomon's voice carried a smug undercurrent. "Excellent. Keep watching." And so I did, forging my will into a fragile shield of defiance. My job was to watch a woman in a room, but the truth was infinitely stranger than I'd ever dreamed. She was gone now, trapped in time's memory, her body sealed in that gruesome tank. Yet her ghost lived on in these recordings, painting across the chasms of years to leave me messages. For what ultimate purpose, I had no ideas. As the footage played, Rachel dabbed her brush on a palette of swirling colors, moving with an absorbed intensity. I thought of all the times I'd believed these painting sessions were live. Now, it felt like a eulogy for a past that never truly existed in sync with my present. The heartbreak was almost unbearable, but I forced myself to keep looking, keep waiting, keep searching for the final puzzle piece. Because maybe in the swirl of improbable illusions, there remained a chance for justice or meaning. Some last hope that her precognitive gifts might empower me to do what she never could. Break free from the Watchers, from this labyrinth of manipulation. At that moment, the painting she was working on came into full view for a second on the feed, and I glimpsed a swirl of shapes that might be letters. My body jolted, adrenaline spiking. I tried to shift forward, but the straps held me firm. Solomon leaned in, eyes glittering with interest. "Yes," he murmured. "That's it, Thomas. Watch carefully." I braced myself, tears still drying on my cheeks, and stared at the screen. If Rachel had a message for me across time, it might be my only lifeline. She had died not knowing if I'd see it. I had lived not realizing she was gone. Now, forced to endure the truth, I clung to the possibility that her final painting might hold some key to unraveling or toppling this entire monstrous enterprise. And so I watched, strapped to the table, the rhythmic beep of a machine in the background. Solomon perched behind me with a loaded gun. The feed advanced frame by frame, Rachel's brushstrokes forming colors, lines, hidden letters. My chest tightened with sorrow and fury. Rachel, I'm sorry, I thought. I'll see this through. You're not alone. Thus part 4 drew to a close. My captivity shifting from naive watcher to coerced viewer of a dead woman's final days, with Mr. Solomon commanding me to interpret her cryptic, time-shifted messages. Whether I'd find the meaning behind them or remain forever trapped in this facility, I couldn't say. But I knew one thing. I would watch, and I would remember her, and I would do everything in my power not to let her last messages fade into darkness.